Whenever I get gloomy with the state of the world, I think about the defenders of democracy we have right here in Colorado. General opinion's starting to make out that we live in a world of hatred and greed, but I don't see that. It seems to me that hope is everywhere. Often, it's not particularly dignified or newsworthy, but it's always there. Volunteers and voters, organizers and activists, folks working in public service, county clerks and vote counters, and our wonderful Secretary of State, Jena Griswold. When the election was under assault, as far as I know, no one worked harder to set the record straight and defend our votes than our own Madam Secretary, Jena Griswold. If you look at how hard she works to defend our votes, defend our democracy, I've got a sneaking suspicion you'll see that the benefit of having Jena as our Secretary of State actually is all around.
Live from Colorado, it's the first in the Defenders of Democracy series. Follow the rules, every voice counts. Featuring Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold and special guest Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, and starring tonight the master of jazz guitar Sean McGowan, plus spoken word artist Kaya Cockrell, and dance from Oud West, and as always, fun films by the ROX Production Players. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Defenders of Democracy.
Everyone, we're so excited to present our first show in the Defenders of Democracy series. I just want to tell you a couple of things, and then we'll get on with the great music, dance, poetry, and our two very special guests. First, we will be doing a question and answer session with Secretary Griswold a little later on. So if you would like to, type a question into the Q&A window. If you don't see the Q&A window, just look at the bottom of your Zoom window and you'll see a button to click to open it up. Type your questions in there and we'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can. Also, there's an easy way to show your support for Jena during this event, and it involves using your smartphone camera. When you see one of the animated Defenders of Democracy, just aim your phone's camera at the QR code on the screen, tap the link that comes up, and that will take you to an Act Blue page where you can chip in a few bucks to help Jena get reelected. Choose a donation from those listed or fill in an amount in the black box during the bottom near the donate button. Okay, that's the business. Now let's get down to the fun. Let's meet our favorite jazz guitarist, Sean McGowan. How you doing, Sean?
Great, Sandy. So nice to be here. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm so excited you're back with us again. We loved having you last year, and we plan to have you often. I hear you have a little ditty to start us off.
Yeah, let's kick things off and celebrate the community that we're so lucky to be a part of here and get things going. I hope you like this song.
And now, please welcome Colorado Secretary of State, Jena Griswold.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. This is so heart-touching, so thank you guys. Sean, that was amazing. I can see why they keep on inviting you to come back. And I just want to thank everybody with ROX Productions, including Sandy, Tracy, Debbie, Deb, Ron, John, Michael, Gazala, Tiger, Tony, Kaya, Butterfly, Stephanie, Tim, Mike, Howard, Susie, Reese, Ferris, Kyra, Karen, and Katie. That was a mouthful, but you guys are a great team. Thank you so much for your support and everything you do. And I do want to also thank in advance our special guest, Secretary Katie Hobbs from Arizona, which if you all were glued to your TV like me around the election, you saw Katie in action protecting our democracy. So it really fits to have her as our special guest. So thank you all for your support over the last couple of years, because you know I would not be Secretary of State without folks like you, without your support. Because people like me, people who grew up on food stamps, who come from a rural part of the state, don't tend to be in statewide leadership. But I'm just so grateful to be Secretary of State because in 2019, we led the largest democracy reform in the nation. We expanded access to voting, which was really important for 2020. We fought dark money. We reformed and increased transparency of lobbying. And in 2020, oh my gosh, all of us were put to the test. And I will say, we were going into 2020 as already a huge election. We had our first statewide presidential primary for the first time in 20 years. And a week after that, the pandemic hit. And we started to see primaries across the nation not go as well as anticipated. The first one was in Wisconsin, where we saw Milwaukee, 180 polling locations reduced to just 5 in 12-hour long lines. And then we saw the primaries in Georgia, where predominantly Black voters waited in the rain for 12 hours to make their voices heard. So I got to work right away. We started to look at how we could increase access in Colorado. And some of the things we did was increase the number of drop boxes by 55% since 2018. We added 42 extra voting centers. We expanded statewide ballot tracks so you could track your ballot. We made it easier for younger people to have their voices heard and people living on tribal lands. So we started doing all of that work, and at the same time, I found myself as the only Democratic Secretary of State in the nation from a vote by mail state, a state where we mail a ballot to every registered voter. So our elections division and I started working across the nation trying to support states. And I'll tell you, I am just so grateful to have been in that position. Here in Colorado, we had record turnout in the middle of a pandemic. More Coloradans voted in our general election than in any election, in any year in our state's history. We also saw huge increases among specific communities. So for example, I've been working with the 2 tribes in Colorado. We saw about a 20% increase in tribal voting in 2 years. We saw people use our new innovations, and it was just so heartwarming. And nationwide, we expanded access to a mail ballot to over 83% of American voters. It was people like Secretary of State of Arizona, Katie Hobbs, who were fighting for the franchise, secretaries across the nation, and people like you demanding that the pandemic not stop access to voting rights. So overall, friends, we just had a great 2020 when it comes to democracy. I do believe Colorado helped save our nation and save people's access to the polls. So I just really appreciate all of your support. We are going into quite a big election year. And not only am I the first Democrat to hold this seat in 60 years in Colorado, we know that there's going to be a big target by the Republicans to take this seat back. So your all's early support makes all the difference. We have to keep expanding access to voting rights. We have to keep fighting dark money. We have to fortify our democracy. Our work is not done. So thank you all for your support over the last 2 years and your support of my reelection.
For one another. The devil's greatest trick came from convincing humanity that freedom had already arrived before we understood the definition of such. Taught us that freedom had no consequences, that people can refute equality, and that desire should only be self-serving. We must realize that the time has come for us to stop thinking that people who think like us are the only option for evolution. I must look out for you as well as myself as we perpetually attempt to be humans being. Existing. Living. Growing. You should not have to look like me to receive my empathy. Compassion transcends complexion.
Percy. I mean, that's what they call me because of my superpower. Want to know what my superpower is? Shh, don't tell anybody. It's persistence. Yes, persistence is a superpower. I'm proud to use that power on the Defenders of Democracy team because it takes persistence to have a free and fair democracy, to stay active and engaged, to be a part of it all, to defend our democracy. Now, let me tell you about another defender of democracy, Jena Griswold. She has some of the same superpowers as me. She persisted, even against that guy who used to sit in the White House trying to poison people about the safety of mail-in ballots, the fairness of elections that include everyone, and the legitimacy of our elections themselves. She showed persistence, like me, Percy, the superhero of persistence. Okay, enough about me for a minute. How about you? Want to be a superhero too? You can be a defender of democracy right now. Start by aiming your phone like you were going to take a selfie for your Instagram page, but instead, keep the camera pointed at me and that funny-looking QR code there. Focus on that code and a link will pop up. Tap the link and you can chip in to help Jena Griswold to persist at defending our democracy. Or you could also just snap a picture of the screen so you'll have the web address to type into your browser. We hope you'll join the Defenders of Democracy today and persist at what we all worked so hard to achieve in the last few years, and what could so easily slip away if we don't remain persistent. So join us, give what you can, sign up, and be a defender of democracy.
I'm really concerned.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
Could that concern be the way I'm cleaning the dishes?
We'll talk about this later. I'm concerned about Jena. Jena needs to get reelected. It's really important. I heard the other day, and this is really concerning, that there are states out there that are putting restrictions on mail-in ballots and also on voter ID.
Yes, and there's quite a few bills out there. 28 states have 106 bills that want to restrict voter access, but on the flip side, there are 35 states that have 406 bills that want to expand voter access. And that's where we want Jena to be reelected, to be on that side.
Absolutely.
And on your point about mail-in balloting, which was so important this time around, the state of Missouri actually wants to eliminate where people can use things like COVID as a reason not to come into the ballot.
That is very sad.
It is very sad.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's terrible.
By the way, how was dinner?
The best ever, sweetie.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest, Arizona Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. This is quite a production, and it's been a pleasure to be involved in this event just because of all the support and everything. So really appreciate the invitation. Honored that Secretary Griswold and her team asked me to participate. And I would say if all Zooms were like this, we might not actually ever go back to in-person events. So thanks for having me. As much as I hate to rehash the 2020 election and its aftermath, I think it's critical that we continue to talk about the lessons from this experience. And, from those of us on the front lines of that experience. We knew heading into this year, as Secretary Griswold already said, that it was not likely to be a normal election year. And of course, that was borne out, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of the unprecedented levels of misinformation and attacks on our democracy. And we've come to expect these, unfortunately, to some degree from foreign actors and our enemies. But as you all know, these attacks on our elections in 2020 came from the highest levels of our own government. And it is true that secretaries of state have emerged from 2020 as the heroes defending and protecting our democracy. And I'm honored to be among those ranks. So let's first talk about conducting an election during a global pandemic. And I know I'm probably not telling you all anything that you don't already know. Secretary Griswold clearly has tremendous support, and you all know the work she's been doing for voting access in the state of Colorado. But during the pandemic, the roles that secretaries of state played in navigating how to accommodate anticipated record voter turnout amidst COVID-19, while ensuring that none of these voters had to choose between their health and safety and their fundamental right to vote, cannot be overstated. We advocated for resources for our states, coordinated with local election officials, combated misinformation as the trusted sources of election information for the voters in our states, and fought to make our elections as accessible and safe as possible. And we did that. We had the most successful election in our country's history, successful and secure this last year. But while all of this was happening, we are also combating widespread misinformation and attacks on the very systems that would otherwise be used to enfranchise more voters, namely the US Postal Service. While different states were in different places when it came to implementing vote by mail, Secretary Griswold was in the fortunate position of Colorado being able to serve as a model for universal vote by mail. And throughout the election, she provided technical assistance across the country, but she also led the charge in defending that system from attacks by the White House, even successfully suing the Postmaster General to keep him from misleading Coloradans about how to vote by mail. At the end of the day, the antidote to all of this misinformation and really flat out lies about the election is the truth. And as we head into 2021, the role of secretaries of state as defenders of democracy will be even more critical, as it will be up to us as the keepers of elections to continue to tell this truth from the rooftops in order to restore trust and confidence in our elections. But this trust and confidence is not only about telling the truth about what happened in the 2020 election. It's about providing as much transparency as possible into the systems, telling voters how our elections work, ensuring robust campaign finance laws that not only limit the influence of special interests, but also highlight how those interests are playing in campaigns. And Jena not only has a plan for that, but has been working to implement that plan from day one. And I know she's going to continue to do that and leading the nation in campaign finance reform. So I was obviously very excited for my win in 2018, along with Secretary Griswold. But one of the things that made it more exciting was joining the ranks of other great women like Jena as the keepers of our elections and defenders of our democracy. You all obviously know the great work that she's doing in your state. But now Secretary Griswold is not only in this role for the state of Colorado, but she's also the face of the Democratic Secretaries of State in the country as the chair of the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. And as we work to be able to put more Democratic Secretaries of State in charge of our elections across the country, this is a critical role. And so we need to work to keep Jena where she is as the Colorado Secretary, because she is fighting across the country to make sure that we add more Democrats to the ranks of Secretaries of State. So it is obviously so critical that we keep her here. This is why I didn't hesitate when she asked me to join this event in support of her, because now more than ever, we need leaders who are going to ensure the continuity of the progress that's been made, the protections of the systems that are in place, and have a voice of authority to maintain confidence in the integrity of our elections. And I know that Jena is that leader. I'm really proud to have her as a colleague. Thank you so much for having me.
In a democracy, citizens deserve to know who is trying to influence their vote. Don't government officials owe transparency to citizens? Colorado's version of super PACs are called independent expenditure committees. They can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to support or oppose political candidates. Colorado's current laws are such that we don't even know who is doing all of this money raising and spending. Jena Griswold believes that corporations and special interests should follow the same type of disclosure rules that candidates are required to follow. Campaign finance reform is making sure that everyone plays by the same rules, giving voters the facts and making sure everyday people's voices are heard. Jena believes we must bring transparency to the millions and millions of dollars used to influence our elections by increasing disclosure requirements of secret political spending, closing coordination loopholes, and enforcing the campaign finance laws that we already have. Two key reforms she supported have already passed in her first 2 years as Secretary of State. Jena Griswold is working to make sure that Colorado stops dark, secret, hidden money. Let's keep her going.
Hey everybody, Hope here. I'm a defender of democracy, and I hope that you will join me and be one too. They call me Hope because that's my superpower. It takes a lot of hope to keep up our defenses against folks who don't want to allow voters to have their say or give the people a seat at the table. And I hope you will join me in supporting one of our other defenders of democracy, Jena Griswold. She works tirelessly to ensure that every eligible Coloradoan has their voice heard in accessible and fair elections. So see, she's my girl. She's on our team, the Defenders of Democracy. And we want to keep her in office, because that's our best hope. And speaking of hope, I certainly hope that you, too, will become a defender of democracy. Stay engaged, people. Don't let them take another member of our team in the next election. And you'd best believe me when I say they are gonna try. I hope you'll jump in here right now and help defend our democracy. You can start by donating whatever you can to help Jena get reelected in 2022. Why are we starting now? Well, I'll tell you. Jena didn't come from big money. She scrapped her way up and got her education and experience by working hard. But you know what? Big money is looking to take her office in the next election. They don't want every voice to count. They only want power. So I figure we start now. Give a little bit, maybe make it a monthly donation so we don't feel it so much. And help Jena stay on the Defenders of Democracy team. I certainly hope you agree. So come on now. Just point your smartphone camera at this QR code and then tap the link to sign up and donate. Or you could take a picture of this slide so you'll have me to look at. So you will have the web address to type into your browser and donate. Come on. People, let's all be defenders of democracy. You know you want to.
Okay, Sean, that was seriously wonderful. Everyone's singing your praises in the chat. Thank you, man. Hi, everybody. I'm just checking in to make sure you're all doing all right. Hadn't this been fun? Meeting these Shiro defenders of democracy, hearing all this great music, and seeing that video of poetry and dance? Well, we're not done yet, but before we move on, I wanted to remind you that we're going to have a question and answer segment coming up soon. So put your questions for Secretary Griswold in the chat. No, wrong. Put them in the Q&A, in the question and answer window, and we'll be watching for them. And if you haven't already done so, we'd like you to think about signing up to donate and or volunteer to help Jena in her campaign for re-election. I know it's early and we've already done so much in the past election year, but believe me, the night is coming for every seat and office they can grab. And our win margins were frighteningly narrow in 2020. And look at the damage they sought to do at our right to vote. We need to help Jena build a base of funds so she can contend with all the dark money and big donors on the right who are already targeting her seat because of her outspoken defense of our democracy. So if you can, maybe sign up to give a small donation monthly so it doesn't hit your wallet all at once. Or give a big amount if you've got it laying around. We need all of us to be defenders of democracy for this thing to work. Okay, now, more fun is coming up, so strap in and we'll get on with the show.
I really like looking at history through old newspapers. For example, here's a piece from January of 1953 where Eisenhower takes the oath of office for President of the United States.
Yeah, I think reading about history through these old newspapers is really fun too. I just read an article about Richard Nixon. It was Friday, August 9th, 1974. And the title of the article was Legal Obstacles Awaiting Just Plain Citizen Nixon.
Boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, there have been a lot of stories in the newspapers around the nation about Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold. I think she's going to find a very favorable place in history.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
You know, Colorado represents the gold standard for accessible and safe voting. People from all political persuasions support voter protections, including absentee and mail-in ballots, automatic and same-day registration, and early voting.
Jena valiantly defended our system of voting by filing legal action against the U.S. Postal Service when the Postal Service sent an election mailer that she argued might confuse voters in Colorado about how to vote by mail.
She also actively and tenaciously criticized Donald Trump for his attacks on our protected right to vote.
You know, Jena's also been a national advocate for getting rid of voter suppression tactics, including stationing law enforcement officials at polling places, attempts to scale back mail-in voting, especially in the face of the pandemic, the reduction of polling sites, the reduction of drop boxes, and limiting hours for voting, and the illegal purging of voter rolls.
I'm so proud to live in Colorado and to have a person of such high character for Secretary of State.
Yeah, I think history's going to smile on Jena, especially if we provide her a platform on which for her to do her good work. You know, I think people 60 years from now who are sitting around reading old yellow newspapers will think fondly about Jena and the good work that she's done. And they'll think fondly of us.
Jena is a Colorado treasure and works tirelessly in a difficult political environment to protect the citizens of our state. Please join us as we support Jena Griswold in her bid to secure another term of Secretary of State in Colorado.
it's time for our wonderful Secretary of State to come on in for a Q&A session with the audience. Hi, Jena.
Hey, Sandy. This is an amazing event. I'm loving it.
It's been fun, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
So it's been so good to spotlight your hard work defending our democracy during this event. We just all want to say thank you. You've been some of the best work we've ever done achieved.
Oh, thank you. There's just so much more to come. Even this legislative session, we're going to continue to fight foreign interference and actually stop a lot of corporate money from coming into our elections. So I just really appreciate everybody's support.
Yeah, we want to support you. That's why we made you our first in the series, Defenders of Democracy. So I'm just going to have some questioners come on in. We have a young lady named Reese, I think, who has a question. Reese, come on in here.
Hi, Jena. So
Hi,
our
Reese.
first question actually comes from our team. And our question is, how have you expanded access to voters since you've been Secretary of State, and how will you continue to do so in the future?
Well, thank you, Reese, for that question. It's great to see young people participating. I'm the youngest Secretary of State in the nation, and I'm just so excited to see you being involved. Okay, since I've been Secretary of State, to start off with, in 2019, we passed the Colorado Votes Act that guaranteed for the first time ever a drop box or polling center on every single public university and tribal lands. We also increased drop boxes by 55%, did parolee reenfranchisement. We passed, and then my office implemented automatic voter registration, registering tens of thousands of Coloradans right in the middle of the pandemic. And the list just goes on and on and on. And one thing that you will always get from me is a fight for voters, a fight for everyday people. Because when it comes down to it, elected officials should not be able to use the tools of voter suppression and big money in politics to demute all of our voices, to really push all of our voices down so special interests can be heard. And that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for everyday Americans, everyday Coloradans to be heard in our democracy.
And that's why we love you so much, Secretary Griswold.
Oh,
I believe an old friend of yours is here with a question. Howard, do you want to come on in?
Hey, Jena, how's it going?
Hey, Howard, nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Hey, we got a bunch of people asking the same thing,
Okay.
so I decided to kind of combine them
Okay.
from Lene, Nancy, John L., and Ruth. They're all about ranked choice voting. What's your opinion on it? Are you in favor in voting some elections? Are you doing anything to promote it? And we have someone that is asking if it's possible for it to happen in the 2022 elections, general or primary.
Oh yeah, so lots of interest with ranked choice voting. Nice to see you, Howard. Howard was one of my first campaign friends, and that's the great thing about running for office. You just meet so many great people who become your friends. Okay, ranked choice voting. I'm very supportive of alternative voting methods, and actually within months of becoming Secretary of State, I set up a committee to explore just alternative voting methods and the transition to those voting methods. As for the question about 2022, unfortunately, it takes a really long time. There's a lot of work to change our voting systems. To share with you all, a state RFP, so a request for bids in the state system by itself can take 6 to 9 months. But I do think that the conversations are really touching or meaningful happening right now. There is a piece of legislation. We're working with the drafters, both to make sure that the timeline can be implemented by my office, because as we move into first of the nation type work, when it comes to, for example, risk limiting audits with ranked choice voting, we want to make sure those systems work, and it is a really big lift. So we're in conversations right now. I also think it's really important that we don't put the cost on small business owners during a pandemic. So all that's being negotiated, but I think overall, Colorado is the gold standard of elections, and we're just going to keep on innovating to make sure that everyday people have their voice heard, and that we all have a seat at the table.
Wow, that was a great question and a great answer. We've been studying up on our team on ranked choice voting. Thank you so much, Jena. Someone who ran for election at the same time as you is Kira. Kira, come on in with your question.
Hi, Jena.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Good to see you again. Yeah, so a couple of people have asked questions actually about the U.S. Post Office. Clark's and also Ike McCorkle asked the questions about specifically how the last administration's efforts and actions to destroy the postal machines and equipment, did that affect our capacity in the state of Colorado? And was there a cost involved in the destruction of any equipment? And what could we do to prevent future administrations from that happening again?
Well, it's so nice to see you. I can't wait to see everybody in person, hopefully in the fall. And I would just say the president was doing everything he could to undermine confidence in our elections and make voting harder. He didn't want Americans to vote, or specific types of Americans to vote. And one of the things he was doing was trying to use the Postal Service to undermine vote by mail. But we know in Colorado how important the post office is to delivering those ballots. So I took action right away with our fabulous Attorney General. We sued the postmaster 2 times and won 2 times. The first was a multi-state lawsuit to stop the post office, to enjoin them, restrict them from taking any more of those voting equipment, the postal equipment, or change overtime, all the things they were doing to try to make it slower. And then we also sued the post office over a postcard they sent to Colorado voters that had incorrect information that could have led to the disenfranchisement of Coloradans living in the southwest part of the state. So overall, we took those actions with enough time. And then I actually was able, in a conference call of Secretaries of State, to get the Postmaster General to admit that he would stop and that he disagreed with the president on some of the wild allegations he was making. And I would just say we took action fast enough that we did not have problems when it came to the election in Colorado. But I think the big picture is the idea that a president running for election can use the tools of the federal government to tilt the election in his favor. And I think we have to fortify our democracy. That means at the state level, stopping all the bad bills that have been introduced to take us backwards. We only want to go forwards with our voting access. And that means nationally, federal guidelines, federal laws guaranteeing all voters' right to cast the ballot in safe, accessible, and secure elections. So, luckily we were able to prevent that bad situation from affecting our elections, but we have to fight to make sure that in the future it doesn't happen successfully.
Wow, this is another great question. And Jena, I have to say, it's really exciting to have an opportunity to hear your passion come out in response to these questions. I mean, you're the real deal, and that's why we love you so much. Would you be able to take a couple more if we do them real quick?
Yeah, of course. Yes, of course.
Wonderful. Our team has all kinds of people on it, and one of them is one of our legal advisors and also just a team member at large, and he is here with a question from the Q&A. Mike, would you like to ask the secretary a question?
Yes, hello, Jena. I have a question here from Sylvia D. How would you convince a non-voter to register and vote?
Well, thank you, Mike. Nice to see you. I love your library. So I think there's 2 things. First, we need to make sure that registering to vote and actually casting that ballot is convenient. That's why it's so important that Colorado did everything we've done in the last several years to increase access to a drop box and to a polling center. For example, in a time during the pandemic when Texas or Ohio was restricting drop boxes, one per county. We were expanding them, hundreds of extra drop boxes, because I don't think that Americans should have to wait in a long line to cast their ballot. This isn't a test of how much time you have. This is your constitutional right, so you should be able to exercise them in an easy way. And I will tell you, Mike, you know, in the first remarks I presented, I mentioned that we were working with the tribes and we increased tribal turnout. What that looked like was, number one, me visiting the tribes. I'm told I'm the first Secretary of State to visit the 2 tribes located in Colorado. And we listened to what the tribal council said that they needed. And that was the basis of our Native American voting reforms in 2019, which guaranteed a drop box or polling center on the tribes and made sure that people, if they didn't have an address recognized by the Postal Service, that would not prevent them from being able to vote a mail ballot. And we made sure that having a tribal ID wouldn't be used as a means to disenfranchise Native Americans living on tribal lands in Colorado. But it's things like that, working with communities, listening to them, listening to the access, and then delivering on access. And then the second part, I know Sandy turned her video on, I will wrap it up. But the second part is that, you know, part of it is access, but part of it is Americans believing that their voice matters. And I will tell you, as someone who's the first in my family to go to a 4-year college, as someone who didn't have healthcare when I was younger, who didn't have reliable transportation, and who now has over $200,000 of education debt, I consider myself very lucky. But there's so many people who grew up like me, who did not get the chance to have the great education I had, who are not statewide office holders. And I'll tell you, for so many Americans, it looks like elected officials are not working for them. So that's why I think we have to unrig our democracy and put the power back in the hands of the people. But then elected officials need to deliver. They need to deliver for working people. That's how you get people excited about government, caring about government. Because if they don't feel that their interests are represented, why would they waste their time? That's what we have to change. And I'm just so happy to be from the background that I'm from and to be able to deliver on my campaign promises to Coloradans. And we need all elected officials to do the same.
And don't let me turning on my video stop you. I think this is the most
timer.
This is the most exciting part of the event. It's like a town hall. I am loving it so much. We've just trained everybody to turn on their video first if we think it's about time for them, so we don't get that black screen.
So that wasn't the gong to wrap it up.
No,
Okay.
We have no gong. You're in
No
charge
gong.
here. So I have one more question if you can handle it. And
Yeah,
this is from our team member, Karen. Karen, come on in.
Hi, Madam Secretary. This question is from Deb McKillop and Patricia Fisk. They both want to know what support is most helpful to your work. How can they volunteer for your campaign? And does it matter where they live in Colorado?
Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you. I like your background too. That's pretty neat. I would say right now, look, this is a hard campaign. I'm the first Dem to win since Eisenhower literally was sitting in the White House. So it's a very hard campaign. It's statewide, and we have to work around the clock to be able to have the resources to communicate with Coloradans. So the number one thing at this point is donating. Whether that's 10, 20, 200, or 1250, we're raising the funds right now to show that we can win again. You know, my opponents, and there's some big names out there potentially running against me, are going to be looking at the strength of the campaign. They'll start likely announcing in May, June, and over the summer. So the more we raise right now is the stronger that will look. In terms of volunteering with the campaign, please shoot us an email. You can always email my great finance director, Celia, at jennifercolorado.com. We'll be starting to mobilize further in the year. And of course, we want people from all over Colorado to help. I'm a statewide elected official. I represent all Coloradans. So no matter where you are in the state, we want your help. I know that we can win this seat again. I also know that there has been a a lot of I guess indication that I will be the top target of 2022. So we're just going to get to work now, and we're going to win this seat, because a win for this seat is a win for voters. I'll stand up against the conspiracy theories. I'll make sure that we're making fact-based decisions and fortifying our democracy. So I'm just so excited for the years to come, and I'm excited to campaign with all of you all and win this seat again.
Jena, that was such a wonderful answer. I mean, the time and volunteer effort that we invested putting you in office has given us the best return we could ever have wanted.
Oh, thank you.
And that's why we wanted to get in here early this year too and start funding your campaign. So everyone give what you can. And we were so smitten with Jena that last year we made a film about her, and we're going to show it right now. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
2018 was a year of firsts for Colorado. We elected our first Democratic Secretary of State in over 60 years, and the first Democratic woman Secretary of State in our history. Jena Griswold, a working-class Colorado native, got her first job the summer after 7th grade to help out, and saw a lot of families struggle. That inspired Jena to be the first in her family to attend a 4-year college and then law school. After serving as a voter protection attorney for President Obama, the time came to return home to Colorado. Now, as the youngest statewide elected official, Jena is a rising star in Colorado politics. In 2019, she worked to help pass a number of significant pieces of legislation. In 2020, our Secretary of State's office is the leading advocate in expanding mail ballots nationwide and has engaged with nearly all 50 states to help ensure election officials run safe and accessible elections. Advocate, mentor, leader. Jena Griswold, Colorado's Secretary of State.
Hi folks, my name is Dieter, and I'm a defender of democracy. They call me Dieter because my superpower is determination. After last year's election and the aftermath, I know all of you are tired. You worked hard, you gave all you could give. You volunteered and campaigned and donated and voted, and you deserve a break. But let me tell you, we can't let our guard down now. Look what a close call the elections were in so many ways. 2 slim margins where there were wins and a loss of seats in the U.S. House. And even after January 6th, the folks on the right show no remorse. They'll be coming for every seat they can get, including the top tier of electeds in Colorado. That's why I'm asking you to join the Defenders of Democracy team and start supporting Jena Griswold's campaign for re-election right now. She's been a strong defender of our free and fair elections here in Colorado, and she deserves our support. Jena doesn't come from big money, but we know for sure that big money is coming for her. With plans to defeat her campaign for re-election, let's all be determined to keep her in office. So join the Defenders of Democracy team and pitch in whatever you can, won't ya? Maybe a little bit every month if that's easier for you. However you can do it, be a superhero and help us defend democracy. You just scan the QR code here with your smartphone camera or take a picture of the screen so you'll have the web address to type into your browser. This is Dieter, one determined superhero, saying thanks and welcome to the Defenders of Democracy team.
Folks, we've had a lot of fun tonight, haven't we? Let's do this again in about a month. You want to? Because on March 21st, we're doing our second in the Defenders of Democracy series, Follow the Law, Equality, Justice, Freedom. featuring Colorado AG FUNraiser and his special guest, Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro. So watch for trailers for that event coming out soon. But right now, watch this fun video about the folks who produced this series and others.